Hello again. I'm back with the Misuses of Power Influence, the very end of Chapter 12 and the final video lecture of our course for this semester. We're going to start with the first misuse of power and influence, and that is sexual harassment. Sexual harassment violates the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1984, and there's two general categories that you can probably pick out of this description, or definition rather, from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So the first that we're going to talk about is quid pro quo, which is something for something. So requests for sexual favors and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. Now, that's the first type. That means if you do this sexual favor for me, I will give you something, a raise, a promotion, special privileges that other people don't. But there has to be an exchange of sex in some form. The next is much more easy to put behaviors into this category because it's kind of open to interpretation of whoever the person is who's receiving it. So the second half of this is it implicitly affects an individual's employment, unreasonably interferes with an individual's work performance, creates an intimidating, hostile, and offensive work environment. So that last part, that it creates a hostile work environment, that's the second type. So the first was quid pro quo. You do this, it's something for something in Latin, which means you do the sexual favor, I give you something. The second, creation of a hostile environment. So this is really broad. This is verbal and nonverbal behaviors, telling a dirty joke, making eyes at somebody, flirting with somebody, anything that makes another worker uncomfortable. You could be telling a dirty joke to a buddy of yours, but if there's a female coworker that finds that sort of thing offensive and overhears it, and it keeps continuing even after she comes to you and asks you to stop telling dirty jokes, you could be liable for claims of sexual harassment. So be very, very careful in how you behave in work environments when they are somewhat unprofessional, because they can be misconstrued as sexual harassment. There's a couple of things that you want to ask yourself when you're recognizing sexual harassment, and the first thing is it real and does it have sexual meaning? Not everything has sexual meaning. Now we know that there are, we can allude to sex and we can have a roundabout inference could be made. Somebody could take something sexual away from something that's not. So if you feel like you're being sexually harassed, you need to ask yourself, does it really have sexual meaning? And is that not just for me, but other people as well? Next is it job related? And what this means is, does the behavior have something to do, or will it influence the way you are doing your job? Is it going to affect your job performance? Next is, did you reject the behavior? Did you clearly make known to the other person that this was an unwanted message or behavior and you would like it to stop? And next is there a pattern? Is there a consistency, Is it continuing on and giving you kind of a higher level of stress because of the frequency of it? So that's how you recognize it. How do you respond? You've answered yes to all those questions. It's persisted, I rejected it, it's job related, and it is sexual in nature. So, the next thing you have to do is probably respond to the sexual harasser or the harassment itself. So you talk to the harasser and you tell them how it's making you feel. You've asked them to stop. They haven't stopped. And you're really concerned that it's going to spiral into a place where you don't want to go. And you'd like, again, to ask them nicely to stop. If it doesn't stop, you need to then collect evidence. You need to know dates and times. When did this thing happen? You're literally creating a log that can be used as evidence. And I know that sounds odd, but it's important that you do that because there are legal implications. Begin with the appropriate channels. That means that there's probably a chain of command you have to follow. My guess is most of you would have to start with human resources. That's a good thing to know. What do I do in this situation? You will file a formal complaint. You can also look up organizations online that can help you do it on the internet if you feel like your company's not able to file a complaint internally. But don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. You're not too sensitive. You may need to secure emotional support from friends or family or even a trained professional, but it's not your fault that somebody else is engaging in behaviors that are unprofessional. Bottom line. You do want to avoid any type of sexual harassment behaviors. That means that people aren't interested in you rubbing their shoulders or their back, or you making jokes or crude gestures, or using profane terms that really apply to sexual acts or different names for parts of the body that just, again, they're not professional and they shouldn't be used in that environment. Make sure you're listening for negative reactions and maybe even watching for nonverbal reactions. Sometimes our face tells a lot more than we can verbally communicate. And don't say or do things that your partner would find offensive, that your parents would find offensive, that your child would find offensive. Just don't engage in those behaviors. It's not the place, and you do not want to get fired for being what you consider a fun and funny person, because it's neither, and you're causing stress to somebody else, which really isn't fair because they need a safe environment in which to do their job. The next type of misuse of power is called power plays, and this is your second assignment. We talked a little bit about the movie clip and some of the other video lectures, so this is your other assignment, which is power plays. You have a quiz on sexual harassment too, but the writing assignment is power plays this week, and again, your last application assignment. So power plays, to be defined, they're patterns of behavior. They take unfair advantage of somebody, and they deny somebody the right to make their own choices. So really, you're manipulating them or trying to persuade them in a very power-hungry way that's really not fair to them. There's 3 different types of power plays. So when you're doing your assignment, you need to take each scenario, and there's 3 scenarios, and you need to identify which power play is it. Here are the types that you may choose from. The first is called the nobody upstairs power play. This means that you plead ignorance of socially acceptable rules. And so you may be like, oh, did you not want me to check your Facebook? Or, oh, it's not okay if I look at your phone to check your text messages? Or, I don't think other people do that. That's not a thing that people follow, is it? So they really just claim ignorance that that's normal ways of behaving, and you know that it's a normal way of behaving. So do they. They're pretending like they don't think it's normal. Somebody may go, well, I mean, all partners curse at their spouse. No, they actually don't. And that would be pleading ignorant to a socially acceptable rule that means we don't curse at the people that we are married to or involved in a serious relationship with. The next type of power play is the you owe me. It's, I did this for you and you're in my debt and you're always going to be in my debt. So it's the you owe me, I did this for you, you're going to do this for me because you owe me. Last but not least is the you gotta be kidding, and that's all run together. That is how it's in your book. And basically the listener or the person who's talking to you, they put down your ideas to discredit you. They kind of say, you got to be kidding. You're really not like this. You don't really think that's true. You're not really this type of person, are you? I mean, you've got to be kidding me. This is a ridiculous thought pattern. This is a ridiculous behavior. I mean, you're joking. People don't really do this thing. Those are your 3 types of power plays. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can respond to power plays. In your assignment, you're going to follow these 3 tips at the bottom. Responding to power plays, this is a cooperative response where you express your feelings. I feel blank. Describe the behavior you object to when you blank. And then you're going to state a cooperative response you can both live with. Now, in that cooperative response, you want to enable the other person to save face. You want to say, I want you to knock before you're coming into my room. I want you to stop telling me I owe you things. I want you to stop ridiculing my ideas. You want to make sure you help them save face, though, because positive faces, they want to be liked. Negative faces, they can do what they want. So you want to make sure that your response enables them and acknowledges both their positive and negative face, but you also want to be clear, very clear, and brief about what you'd like them to do. The other two ways you can respond to power plays that are not going to be acceptable for the assignment, I don't want you to write these on your assignment, but you can ignore power plays. If they are not happening again and again and it's an isolated instance, just ignore it. The second way is, again, treat it as an isolated instance, but object to it just by saying, please don't do that again, and leave it at that. You may not need to do this 3-step format down here at the bottom of this slide. For the assignment, yes, please have this 3-part message written. After you've identified the power play, you're going to respond to it following this. So this slide is what you need to refer back to when doing your assignment. But you could ignore it. You could also object in a much more brief way, but don't rely on that for this assignment. So that's it, the end of chapter 12. We talked about the principles of power and influence, the basis of power and influence, where does our power and influence come from, and then how it can be misused. So thank you for watching the video lectures this semester. I hope they were helpful to you, and take care. Remember what you've learned this semester, and I think you'll find great success and improvement in your relationships in the future.